more than happy to be to have a chat, and so don't worry about it at all. So
All right, well, we are recording now, and so I apologize for the technical difficulties. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, we have the author of our, or shall I say the editor of our textbook, Wiemer Snijders. He edited Eat Your Greens, which you have all finished. I've gotten all your reports. And I felt that was very important. Now, our last special speaker calls you the Dutchman with the famous banana. That's JP. He spoke last 2 weeks ago. And so now my students know that when this is recorded, it's going to be uploaded so they can watch it over break.
all right.
You are a partner at Commercial Works, and I know you had mentioned another version of Eat Your Greens is going to be coming, so maybe you'll talk about that as well. So we've asked you to speak to our class about 3 things: the banana, which a lot do a little, a few do a lot, distinctive versus differentiated, and then maybe some tips on how a graduate can be cognizant of being a scientific marketer and not just a run-of-the-mill type that follows Gary Vee or Simon Sinek or any of these bad folks out there advising marketers in a very bad way. So those are some of the topics, and I just want to turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, well, more than happy to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share a few thoughts and ideas on the topics you just mentioned. So yeah. So was there anything in particular around the first one?
Well, the first thing is, when I heard the great interview that Giles did in the Gasp podcast, and after you received all the different essays from the different folks that submitted it, you said that the banana chapter was missing, and so it was important that is the first chapter. And so maybe a little bit about why you felt that was so important for a foundation for scientific marketing in this book.
Yeah, I think if you really want to boil it down, I think if you just if you just look at what's going on in marketing and what people get worked up about, is that there's I would say that's the largest group of people, simply because that most of us have been brought up with ideas. And that school of thought, and it's a school of thought of the high engagement model of marketing, and there's a smaller group, but it's growing, I would say, of people that believe in the lower engagement model of marketing. So I think really, if you look, at least that's how I sort of try to view things, just when I read up on things that are happening in the industry, whether it's just agencies or advertisers doing things, or just if you look at the literature. I think it's fair. You could be fair to say that actually, there's 2 schools of thought, just broadly speaking, and that the high engagement model of marketing, the people that sort of support that and advocate that, are very, very sort of obsessed with it almost. But they believe it's important that customers, people, engage with brands, have positive attitudes towards brands, and as marketers, we should do everything that we can do to make people happy, love our brand, buy the brand more often, or things like that. And we tend to value, or those people tend to value the people that buy frequently a lot, because they, on an individual level, they spend more, they buy very often. So surely these people are into our brand, and we should connect with them, and we should try to convince them, encourage them, seduce them to buy even more, or tell people about all the great things that we can offer as a brand, in the hope that they'll tell their friends and families, and all sorts of things like that. So, and if you view marketing through that lens, you can see that there's a lot of stuff going on where people are trying to encourage brands, advertisers, to find these people and sell more to them. On the other end, there are people that think and find that actually most people probably aren't very much into brands. the majority of people actually don't buy very frequently. So, are these people really in love with these brands, or are they actually possibly, sort of indifferent, more likely if the majority of these people, probably buy brands maybe once or twice a year. So what does that tell us? About the importance of, let's say, engagement or brand love, or the objective of trying to sell more to these people, more, or have them spend more. And I think when and that the high model, the high engagement model of marketing encourages people to do things like targeting or retargeting. You're trying to find very specific groups of people, and all those sorts of things. And as a scientific marketer, the thing you should be concerned with is what does the evidence tell us? What does the majority of people do, or what does the majority of consumers do? What does buying look like, and what does that tell us? And this is where, as a scientific marketer, if you look at the evidence, you find that the vast majority of people buy brands very infrequently. And if you would look at a customer base, or any brand's customer base, you would find that a lot of people do a little and a few do a lot, which is, that distribution, which is sort of banana shaped. This is why I use the banana as something that is probably more easy to remember for people, instead of the negative binomial distribution, which is sort of the correct statistical name for it. This was all discovered by Andrew Ehrenberg in the late 50s, 1959 to be exact, when he wrote a paper about it, which was called The Pattern of Consumer Purchases. So, this is not nothing, it's not something new, but we've known about it for a very, very long time, and it's actually fairly easy to find in your own data if you care to look for it, and if you know how to analyze it. And time and time and again, whether you are a service brand or a consumer packaged goods company, you will find that a lot of people do a little, spend a little, or buy very infrequently. And sure enough, there are people, generally very few, that do spend a lot of money or buy very frequently. So you will find that that distribution in any brand's customer base, if you care to look for it. So I think if you're a marketer who's interested in science and in evidence, this is the sort of stuff you need to know about, because the implications are far-reaching. It's something extremely fundamental when it comes to buyer behavior. It's something that we've been able to, many people have replicated, and we've found time and time and again over the decades, essentially. So even though that the media landscape has completely changed, then we've got smartphones now. We can buy online while we're on the go. If you compare that to the 50s or the 60s, but the way we buy fundamentally hasn't changed. So it's intriguing because it tells you something about the sort of almost fundamental nature of people, and the implications are, as I said, far-reaching. If you swim against this current, so to speak, you'll very likely end up in a very bad spot. You might drown. And the interesting thing, I guess, is that this knowledge has been progressively built up over the decades, and there are people that know it, that understand it, but it's somehow let's say lost the battle for attention. Maybe I don't know if that's the right way of describing it, but there's just that other school of thought, the model of high engagement marketing, which is probably just more, I guess it spoke more to the imagination of marketers, as by which I mean, marketers are being hired to sell more stuff to more people. So what do they do? They create campaigns in the hope that people will like those campaigns, and as a result, walk out, go to the store and buy their brand.
Mhm.
So I think marketers generally put a lot of time and effort into doing things where consumers will go, wow, yeah, that's great, I want one of those, something like that. So they're probably by nature very enthusiastic, positive about what the brand has to offer. It's their job to make other people enthusiastic about the brand, or at least make sure that these people will notice the brand and will go out and buy it. So that the whole idea, the whole school of thought that plays into that sentiment, the idea of, you know, you should make sure that your customers are happy customers. You should make sure that their brand experience is a positive one, so they'll tell other people about this great brand, and all those sorts of things. That probably plays in much more to the to what marketers themselves are interested in and trying to achieve. Yet, if you just look at the reality of things, going back to that distribution, what we find is that, I think in Eat Your Greens, the first chapter, and I'll get on your question in a minute, is even as longitudinal studies found that, if you measure buying behavior over multiple years, what you find is that um, a very large proportion of people just will buy your brand maybe once in 5 years, 6 years. Over that time, 3/4 of people will have bought the brand once a year or less. So let's say once a year on average. But these people do represent about roughly 40% of your sales. So for brands and for marketers, these people are actually extremely important. But that's not what, that's we fail to see it, because these people do not tend to show up in research very often. These people buy once every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. These people, you hardly see them. They don't engage with your brand. They won't pick up the phone. They won't correspond with you. They won't respond to any of your marketing activities very much, because they're not really interested in your brand. They just buy it once. Maybe they just bought it on accident. But no, nonetheless, if you take them all together, it's a huge group of people that represent a considerable amount of revenue. So they're not easy to find, not easy to spot. Let me ask you a question. Uh, if you let's say you're a marketer for a retail company. If I'd ask you, Tom, could you tell me what's the most frequently occurring number of items in a basket? If we would measure this, let's say over the course of a year, if you just look at all the baskets, what will be the most frequently occurring number of items in a basket?
Be pretty hard to come up with. I mean, you come up with a number, what does it tell you?
Well, the answer should actually be really easy, because the answer is one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what the distribution tells you. That's
Right.
what the negative binomial distribution, or the banana, tells you. The banana will tell you the most frequently occurring number of items is, which is the mode, if I can remember correctly, is one.
That
But
makes sense.
most people will buy one thing. But the thing is, when we think about a retail environment, well, and when you're in line with your shopping cart, you just see a lot of people with a lot of stuff in there, don't you? And a lot of people tell me, well, it's 7 or 12 or 20 or 5, stuff like that, which is intuitive. That's intuitive, because you tend to look around and think about, so what did I see when I went shopping last time? But as I said, it's very hard to see all these people just walk in and buy a single thing, because you don't really see them. But if you take them all together, they're a very large group of people. So in terms of uh, it's a very, very important aspect of buying behavior that you need to take into account when you do marketing. And what was interesting, when I asked the contributors to the book to write their piece, um, I don't know if I'd do it again, but I simply said to people, listen, you can write about anything you want. You're an expert in your area. I'm not going to tell you what you want, what you need to write about. As long as you write something about marketing, and you base it on facts. So, people will understand where your opinions, ideas come from. So that's pretty open-ended and sort of not very specific, essentially. And what I found was that I was expecting that there to be a few gaps, so to speak. I obviously selected and asked people to contribute. So I had a bit of an idea of what people would probably write about. And I tried to sort of make sure that most people would, well, most likely write about something else, so there wouldn't be a lot of overlap. But I was actually expecting a few people to sort of reference it, or more explicitly write about it and the implications for a particular area, or just in general. I don't know. But I think what was interesting was that there was no direct reference to the NBD or an example of it, and people commenting on it. So it became quite clear that for a book that tried to sort of offer a bit of to try to sort of counter some of the nonsense, or a lot of the nonsense that is out there. There had to be a chapter about that sort of very fundamental thing, because actually I think if you take the time to think about it, and think through the implications, many of the other chapters in the book will make a lot of sense. And I think Eat Your Greens, you could in a way, was never set out to be a book about that topic necessarily or specifically, but it is a book where I would say almost all the authors would be of the opinion that actually the low engagement model of marketing is a much more fruitful way of thinking about marketing, and what we should do, or what our role as marketers should be, versus the high engagement model of marketing, where we get distracted, led astray, and actually we shoot ourselves in the foot by actually doing a lot of things that will not help you grow the brand very much, which is obviously something we essentially in the end all strive for. We're all being asked by a CEO or a CFO to sell more, increase our margin, improve increase revenue, improve margins, and sell more to more people for more. So that's why I just waited until I got everything in, and decided to write the chapter I wrote together with Charles.
Well, I think you just described humaning. Isn't there some company just came out with their new approach? They're going to humanize or humaning or.
Yep. Yeah, Mondelez. So Mondelez is is it confectionery? Is that the
yes,
right word?
Yeah.
So so I think that was sort of they wrote about that, or it was announced last week, and humaning indeed, which you that's a bit of gobbledygook, and at the end I think the last sentence is all about connecting with consumers and engaging them and then turning them into super fans, which again, if you just think about high level of engagement, low level of engagement models of marketing, again it's a perfect example of a high level of engagement model of marketing, where the company is trying to turn people into super fans. I don't even know what that means when you're selling chocolate, well, and so surely there are people that will eat chocolate almost every day. I must say I'm a big fan of chocolate, so I do like to have a bit of a nibble almost every day when I sort of at the end of the day, something like that. So sure enough, I'm probably a heavy user of the category. But what are you going to do? Are you going to try to have me eat even more, or do you want me to sort of tell all my friends about this fantastic chocolate bar that you have? And sure, there will be people that do that, but most people, as I said, especially in categories like chocolate, most people will buy your brand very infrequently. You shouldn't be surprised that most people buy once every 3 years or so. So what's the deal here, people? Do that's just that's what these people do, and the vast majority of people do, and actually that's fine. It's a great way of making a lot of money, just as long as you acknowledge that most people are perfectly fine with just picking you up once in a while. And if you just think about that, and if you think about what that means for marketing in terms of what should we be doing, it's sort of almost, wow. So have we really sold what we have on offer to everyone in the category? So let's stick with chocolate. Are we already selling to everybody who's buying chocolate? To which the answer very often is no.
Mhm.
So there is still room to improve on that. And so if we can only get some of these people just to try us once, what you will find is that you're going to make huge amounts of money actually off of it, instead of trying to convince the people that are buying you every week to buy you, well, a bit more often again. It's because there's actually just so very few of those people. It will have just a marginal impact on your revenue. So the great opportunity is still in trying to get more people to try you out once, maybe once in 3 years. It will make a very big difference. But it leads into all kinds of different sorts of tactics that you'll deploy. So you won't be sort of obsessed with targeting very specific groups of people. No, you'll be much more concerned with running campaigns that reach a lot of people. You'll be much more concerned with making sure you're widely available. You literally just need to make sure people sort of almost literally trip over you, so to speak. And think about promotions. If a very large group of people just buy you once, let's say once in a year, that's actually, that's essentially already a sort of a more heavier, sure type of buyer. Let's say people buy you once a year. What's going to happen to your margins if you essentially promote your product so people will get it at a reduced price, and then simply because they don't buy you as frequently, you're stuck with selling something to someone at a much lower margin, and they would have probably bought you anyway. So what are you doing? So this is what I mean with the far-reaching implications. But if you understand that buying behavior looks like this, you'll be much much less inclined to, for example, run promotions or be very selective in your distribution, or only advertising in a particular magazine or channel, or only trying to reach particular groups of people if you're just advertising on Facebook, for example, because before you know it, you are excluding a lot of potential buyers, which is stupid. uh, which is, some people sort of offer up particular brands as which they consider to be exceptions. But let's pick out an obvious one. Some people say, yeah, but what about Tesla, for example? These people, that brand that doesn't advertise, and look how much they're selling. But if Tesla would have stuck with the people that initially bought the car, which were electric vehicle enthusiasts, so to speak, really into the category, really looking for a car that was for an electrical vehicle. If Tesla would have thought that was their target audience, they wouldn't been able to sort of grow as much as they do or are doing currently, because I think Tesla also understands that if they want to sell more cars, they just need to sell to a much more wider audience than just a fairly small group of enthusiasts. And they need to develop different models, not just super big, expensive, essentially sports cars. No, we need to introduce a model that's a lot less costly, so a wider group of people are able to sort of buy the product, because at least in the Netherlands, that the Model S still is and was a very expensive vehicle.
Mhm.
It is heavily subsidized, which is one of the reasons why you actually do see a lot of Teslas driving around here. But I think the latest model is well, so the S was probably near 120,000 euros, I think, and I think the latest model is around 40.
Yes.
Yeah, which is great because they're making it available to many more people, and and what you'll get is that a lot of these people are probably not so much into electric vehicles, but or they're sort of they're now that the car is much more competitively priced against other models. They sort of think, well, yeah, it's probably good for the environment, so why not? It's there's not a big difference compared to the vehicle that I currently own. So why not, why not think about a Tesla? But that wouldn't have happened if it was only just a super expensive vehicle, not available to the masses, essentially. And same thing with Apple. Some people serve that brand up. Initially, I don't know. This is probably way before your students were even born. It used to be the campaign for the crazy ones, if you can remember that one, Tom. So this sort of the brand clearly positioned itself as this is for the crazy ones, the creative people, the people
The
that want to be
artists.
different. Yeah, the artists and the creative
The
directors and the
mismatch.
architects.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So what if they really doubled down on that idea and really only try to reach those types of people, which is obviously a much smaller group of people than if you think about to whom they're selling right now. They're essentially saying to anyone who wants to buy a laptop, a phone, or whatever. It's the iTunes really took off when they made it available on the Windows systems. Again, a great example of brands making themselves more widely available to more people. Is a great idea. And the so and people don't stick with Apple products only. They switch to other phone brands or laptop brands. People aren't locked in. People do tend to think that that is a very significant or substantial effect. The idea that once you buy a laptop, you'll buy an iPhone as well, and everything else that comes with it. But if you look at the evidence, going back to being a fact-based or evidence-based marketer, you will find that actually quite a lot of people actually switch back and forth, and they're not necessarily locked into one particular brand. So you need to work with that. You need to you play into that. You need to swim with the current instead of against. And it all goes back to essentially what was written in that first chapter. It's just the nature. It's what people do. It's the nature of buying. And if you there are a lot of attempts by brands who try to do the opposite, and especially in the long term, they all fail. And they're just trying to accomplish something that goes against the way people buy. So that's a shame.
It was one of the required chapters of the book. I picked out certain ones, and that was one that every student had to read and put an application to. And hearing your reaction on the podcast to how brands grow was the same way I felt. I read it only like 3 years ago, and oh my gosh, I've been selling crap. I've been teaching junk. I'm thinking of frequent buyer programs. I love that concept. And as you were describing, a few buy a lot. Well, how dumb am I to try to come up with some way that's now going to reduce my profitability on those people buying a lot when I need to get those few that aren't buying much?
Well, it goes back against to what sort of seems intuitively correct or sounds logical. And, it's, as humans, we tend to take the path of the least resistance. There's another way where you can see that sort of line of thinking appear is especially with service brands. Service brands collect a lot of information about their customers. They tend to, well, they do or do not collect a lot of information, but especially now that the technology is much more widely available and more cheaply, people tend to try to understand much more about their customers and who they are. And, what do you know, if you're a service brand, let's say you sell insurance, sometimes you cock up and, people pick up the phone or send you an email or a tweet and tell you you're terrible or how they think, how you have treated them. But the thing is, so the, and what happens, which is again, it's a very natural sort of almost phenomenon, I would say, is that you tend to pay attention to what you're measuring, because it's easy to measure incoming phone calls, right, or incoming tweets, and especially if people are being really rude, you tend to read that and think, oh crap, what did we do now? You pay a lot of attention to a few,
Yes.
because typically, I don't know about you, but I can't remember ever, well, maybe once or twice in my life, but I can't remember the last time that I had a conversation with my insurance brand. I'm sort of happy with what's being. Well, I understand I need to pay for insurance because if my car breaks down or if I run into something or whatever, I'm sort of covered, hopefully. But nothing has happened in my life that that made me want to pick up the phone with the insurance company and sort something out. And so, and that's the vast majority of people. But you do not track or measure that, because they're not calling you, they're not writing you. What you are measuring is, out of a customer base of, let's say, 50 million people, there's probably 1 million people calling you and complaining or asking questions, all sorts of things, and you're trying to create your customer experience management program around that, and before you know it, you fall into that trap of paying a lot of attention to the few people that are vocal, or that you're dealing with, and before you know it, you just you forget about the 49 million others that are sort of perfectly happy, indifferent, or couldn't be bothered, or don't really care. They just, they're fine. And before you know, you're getting all excited and worked up, and spending a vast amount of time and energy on sort of trying to fix a problem for a very small group of people. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be servicing your clients. I'm not saying that at all. I think every company has has the moral obligation, but just what needs to serve their customers in the right way, and and that's all fine. But if you think that's where growth comes from, that's a whole different discussion. And before you know it, I think you're off your way to shooting yourself in the foot, which is a shame. Yeah.
All right. Now, distinct versus differentiation. I've been selling differentiation my whole career. Back when I started, MBA, my professor said, marketing strategy in a sentence: either you differentiate so your products and customers pick you over every other option, or else you better be the cheapest guy around because you're a commodity. A bastardized version of Porter. But so I've been selling the importance of being different. And then I read in, how brands grow, and this concept of distinct has really woken me up. So if you could maybe speak a little bit to that, I'd appreciate it. I know my students would appreciate the understanding of the difference between the two.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's so once in a while this one flames up again and flares up again, and it's sort of a hotly debated topic once in a while. And again, as you say, almost everyone who works in marketing was brought up with the idea of you know think about what you want to offer to the market, try to find the people that might be interested in it, try to target those people, try to make sure that these people are happy and they become advocates and loyal to your brand, because you thought well about what you want to offer to a certain group of people and how you want to position yourself, what kind of how you want to position your brand in the mind of the consumer, how you want to be seen and be associated with, and then you're on your way. You're all good and set to go. Um, and and the thing is that that then assumes that indeed certain brands are considered to be more, whatever it is, X, Y, or Z, you know, in terms of associations or things you want people to think of your brand. And I think that the big and great contribution of you know, Andrew Ehrenberg and Byron Sharp and all of their colleagues was to demonstrate that, and this ties back into the banana again, is that, you know, bigger brands who have more customers will be more, you know, associated with anything essentially, especially positive attitudinal things. So, you know, what you find, and if you're able to analyze the data that way, if you measure what people think about a brand, and you control for brand size, which is simply just another way of saying, well, you know, if you collect the data and you just sort the brands according to size, with either the biggest brands on the right or the left, whatever, you know, whatever you want, but at least, you know, sort the brands according to size, and then look at what the score, you know, just, and then determine or look at what the scores are like, you will very quickly find a pattern in the data. What you'll find is that the bigger brands are just associated more with anything you've probably asked them, and the smaller brands will be least associated with the things you're interested in. And that will allow you, as a sort of follow-up step, to determine whether any of these scores are higher or lower than you'd expect. Now, let me try and explain this with a shoe size example. Let's say you've got a family, you've got, you know, mom, dad, and 2 kids. So you've got, you know, 4 pairs of shoes in a row. If you would sort those shoes according to size, let's say you put dad on the left, yeah, and then the youngest kid on the right, the utmost right, you're very likely to see a pattern. You'll very likely see that the biggest shoes are on the left, dad's shoes. Mom typically tends to be a bit smaller than dad, you know, has a smaller shoe size, and so on. So what you'll see is that you have this nice row of, you know, 4 pairs of shoes, and, you know, you'll see them going from, you know, big to small. But the interesting question becomes, does dad, for example, if you're interested in dad, does dad actually have, you know, bigger feet or a larger shoe size than you'd expect for a person of his height? So let's say dad is, well, what do you say in the US? Is like 5'8"? Is that the sort of an average length?
That's not bad. Yeah, that's good.
So let's say dad is 5'8", and he has a size 9 shoe size. So what you want to know is whether that size 9 is, you know, bigger or smaller than you'd expect for a person that's 5'8". And the good thing is, this is going back to your first comment, you know, about being an evidence-based or marketer or you know, a scientific marketer. You know, we've been measuring shoe sizes forever, so, you know, we actually do know, you know, what the typical shoe size would be for a person. So now, obviously, we can say, well, you know, given what we've measured and what we know, we can actually say that the size 9 for someone who's 5'8" is actually pretty normal. So nothing to worry about. And you can sort of exactly in the same way analyze perceptual, you know, image data for brands in the same way. You can say, well, is the fact that 43% of the people thought you were fun to use for the biggest brand, you know, is that a high score or a low score, or is it actually perfectly normal, given the fact that this is a brand with a 10% share? And what about the score for the smallest brand in this data set? You know, the brand with only 1% share, and actually they didn't score 43% on this image attribute. They only scored 10%. So is that, you know, given the size of that brand, is that a high or a low score? And the thing is, if you analyze the data like that, and it's you know, this is not rocket science at all, but, you know, it's not for this talk to explain the method behind it, but it's a very straightforward way of calculating it. But you can then calculate to what degree all these scores are, you know, perfectly normal, in line with what you'd expect. And if you analyze the data that way, especially all the data that looks into the degree to which you as a brand are being, perceived more as X, Y, or Z, which would be the basis of concluding that you are, differentiated. You're positioned as the safer car, something like that, or the more fun to use product. But if you do the analysis that way, what you will find very often, in almost the majority of cases, is that the scores from almost all the brands typically tend to be perfectly normal. So there's nothing extraordinary going on there. The only thing you're seeing is that indeed bigger brands are being linked more to a certain attribute and the smaller brands to a lesser extent. But that's all pretty much explained by brand size, essentially the number of customers that you have. And that puts a lot of pressure on the idea of differentiation, because what I'm saying with the vast majority of cases, I'm saying that let's say what you'll find is that probably 90% of the cases, if you look at the scores, 90% of the scores or even more are just perfectly in line and absolutely perfectly normal. So that tells you that sure enough there are a few things that probably deviate a bit. So perhaps a few brands are seen just a wee bit more as X, Y, or Z, but 9 out of 10 or more, the things that people associate with brands is just completely explained by brand size. So essentially, there's no differentiation. People aren't seeing brands more as X, Y, or Z if you control for size. Again, if you control for the size of the brand and the number of customers the brand has. And if that's the case, then differentiation is more the exception than the rule. And you can ask, well, the follow-up question is then more, why is that? And again, I think one of the reasons why we're seeing this, notwithstanding all the efforts by a lot of brands to differentiate themselves, is that, going back to the banana, most people don't really care about brands. They don't really buy it that often. It's not on the top of their minds. Most people are much more concerned with, being home on time, losing weight, getting enough exercise. Oh crap, I need to, Tom asked me to deliver that paper about Eat Your Greens. And, oh man, I actually still need to rewrite it. Those are the things that people get freaked out about. Rightly so, because it's about their lives. It's about, getting a degree, making sure your kids aren't standing in the rain outside for an hour, whatever, your knees collapsing because you put on too much weight, all sorts of, the real stuff in people's lives, and not the light bulb you just bought or the chocolate bar. Come on, if we need to think about all those things, if you need to think about all those things, and even sort of evaluate your purchases and sort of determine to what degree indeed you think this brand is more humaning with you than another, you wouldn't have enough hours in a day. This is why, getting to your last point, the distinctiveness thing is so important. Distinctiveness is very much more about how can we make sure as quickly and easy as possible that people recognize who's doing the talking, what the brand is. I want, it's, I want the one with the red cap, or, it's the simple, quick, easy cues for you to navigate, the aisle, or to make sure, that's that financial services provider I've seen a million times, and they're big, they're okay. I trust those guys, and I have no problem, putting a bit of my saving monies into their accounts. And it's, because I read about them, I know who they are. I haven't analyzed them, but they're this big, well-known, familiar brand, and I'm pretty sure they're okay. I don't know if you've ever gone on holiday and you needed to navigate a supermarket trying to find, I don't know, yogurt. I don't know if you eat yogurt, but let's say,
Yep.
I had this experience last year, I think, where, I was in Italy and we wanted to get out and get some yogurt, and I was walking through the supermarket, and, I typically buy a particular set of brands when it comes to yogurt. And obviously I'm in Italy, so they don't have all those brands, but I'm still looking for those international, well-known brands that I know of, because, I'll probably, if it's like Danone, the big French dairy producer, the chances are that I'll pick up one of those products in Italy are far greater than sort of picking up, a completely unknown, Italian dairy brand, because, I've bought that brand, Danone, more often. I'm sort of assuming that, it won't be that bad probably, but this very, fancy looking or not so fancy looking Italian brand that I've never heard of, I'm not so sure. I want the kids to like it, and, it's not going to cost me, like this. It's not a fortune, but nonetheless, I wouldn't want to be spending money on stuff that people don't really like. So you know what? I'll pick the sort of well-known international, internationally widely available brand. So I'm sort of fairly confident it's going to be okay. Same with McDonald's. When you go to McDonald's in the US or in Europe or in China, you're pretty sure what you're going to get, right? It's just
Yes.
you're actually expecting the Big Mac to be exactly the same thing. So I'll just go to the Golden Arches. The restaurant with the Golden Arches. I'll just pick that one because I'm sort of, it's gonna. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be okay-ish. People aren't looking for, um, you know, um, super experiences when they're buying brands. They just want it to be okay.
Yes.
They don't want it to fall apart. They don't want it to taste. They want it to taste nice, things like that. And so they pick the things that they know, that they've read about, and being distinctive, being easily recognized by people, really helps people in making that purchase decision. So you need to make it really easy and quick by being distinctive. So you need to think about being distinctive, which is essentially meaningless differentiation. The Golden Arches don't mean anything. The BMW logo doesn't mean anything. It's just a quick way of recognizing, oh yeah, that's that German brand, and they're okay. They're making cars forever. That's fine. The burgers taste okay. I'm sure you can get a better burger at whatever sort of local thing, but you're not sure. So um, so when you advertise, it's really important to make sure that the vast majority of these people will buy very infrequently. So it's really important to be really consistent over time. So you actually build up memory structures and associations, simple ones where people know, oh yeah, that's that big well-known German brand, and that's okay. They're okay. I've seen them in the US and UK. I see these cars driving everywhere, and if I want a good car, I'm probably pretty good off if I buy that one. And how can I recognize it? Oh yeah, it's that circle thing with the blue and white stuff in the middle. It's, oh yeah, that's BMW. It's fine. So making sure you're distinctive and you're consistent, you consistently use those assets. So even the people that don't think about you very much and very often can still easily recognize you, the brand. That's way more important than you know, trying to differentiate yourself on particular associations, which is not impossible. There is research and there are examples of certain brands that are indeed more associated with certain things, but that requires a huge amount of time and effort. And again, you should really ask yourself the question whether that's really worth it, worth your money, because it's sort of almost swimming against the current again.
Mhm.
So that's probably a waste of a lot of good time and effort and brain power. We should be much more concerned with creating advertising campaigns that are that are attention grabbing, entertaining, and well branded, so people can instantly and very quickly recognize what the brand is, even if they're not paying a lot of attention. My kids tend to run through the room, and sometimes the TV is on. I'd want advertising to be able to cut through that and make sure that I didn't know what was going on when the ad was on, but I knew it was an ad from Bank A or
Uh,
Car B, whatever. So
mhm.
because that will help me nudge my purchasing decision, which might even only happen in 5 years. But just making sure that those memory structures are just incy wincy, tiny bitty, being refreshed just a wee bit will increase the chances of being bought. Uh, People don't watch advertising. That's only marketers.
Well, over here, they watch it during the Super Bowl. That's the one time
Well,
of the
there you go.
year.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
people
that's
watch
one of
that.
those rare moments where indeed people do, you know, uh, Why is that? Because typically Super Bowl advertising is advertising that's highly entertaining. They're great ads typically. So, there's good stuff going on, and it's actually, it is probably worth people's attention and time. They're enjoying the game, but they're also enjoying the ads, which is sort of extremely rare. But, so this is why it's very interesting as a brand to invest in it. Not only because the vast reach you can get, but also because people are probably even slightly a little bit more interested in viewing the ads and paying just a wee bit more attention to it. So those are good reasons to
Sometimes
continue.
the games are so bad, the commercials are the best thing about it. No offense.
Well, that will be a marketer's dream, but yeah, I would hope that that's often not that would actually be more the exception than the rule when it comes to the Super Bowl. Anyway, no,
Well,
it's a spectacle.
the last thing, I mean, I appreciate that we've almost taken an hour of your time, so I want to end on this. These students are all graduating. This is a capstone class. And so any advice that you could offer on how a marketer can keep their minds to be more scientific in their careers? Certainly some suggestions on being more scientific as a marketer.
Yeah, I think I think it's interesting or it's good to read up on everything that on marketing in general. I think so. Don't just take my word for it that How Brands Grow is a great place to start. I think it's equally valuable to read up on other people so you can sort of make up your mind for yourself what you think of it. But I think what I probably like best about a book like How Brands Grow is not so much the evidence that's being presented, which is sometimes very counterintuitive or surprising. Or I had a similar experience to what you were describing, Tom, in the sense that you're thinking, "Oh, wow, why didn't I know about all this stuff?" But the findings are interesting and valuable. But actually, I think one of the greatest contributions of How Brands Grow um, is that it also actually teaches you how to think about data, how to think about evidence and findings, and how and how you should analyze information, so you can make up your mind whether you're dealing with tosh or something really interesting and valuable. And I think what How Brands Grow is trying to teach people is, simply what you could describe as, the scientific method, which is, that sounds boring and daunting perhaps, but it's really about asking yourself the question: how did people collect this information? Given what we know about the method, did they interpret it correctly, or did they, were there any mistakes potentially made in interpreting the data like that? Was the method actually only looking at a very particular group of people, and are we trying to infer any or are we drawing conclusions based on sort of a skewed, sample, so to speak, or a method that only takes one or two things into consideration? So what kind of method is being used, and how is it being interpreted? And if both the method and interpretation are solid, we potentially have a good idea. And this is where a lot of people stop, or where the market research research industry actually stops. But this, when you've applied a correct method and interpreted it correctly, you only have a potentially interesting idea. The biggest value comes from replicating that research, doing it again, maybe yourself, or have others done this bit of research as well. And what did they find? And actually, did they find the same thing? So did the findings hold over time, various conditions, situations, things like that? Because if that's the case, we're not dealing with one-offs. We are actually dealing with findings that have been replicated, and that are ideally generalizable to many contexts and situations. And in that case, we're dealing with what you could call law-like patterns, if we're talking about behavior, for example. So the thing is, if you if you want to be a good marketer or professional just in general, it's good to read up on, what people have done before you, and new stuff coming out. But it's just thinking about those terms in on how to analyze and interpret data, which comes down to sort of understanding statistics, I would say a bit better. And that again sounds really daunting and sounds like a lot of formulas, but actually, if you boil it down, it's really about asking some really simple questions like, how was this information collected and what conclusions were drawn? And, if that is so solid, did other people find that as well? Oh, and if that was the case, was that only in a very particular situation or instance? Or were these actually things that we found broadly, amongst, many groups of people, different industries, things like that. So those are sort of simple questions to ask yourself, and which will help you sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. And I think the analogy with what we're dealing with currently with COVID is an interesting example where, at least on a daily basis, you can actually train yourself in asking these questions. There's a lot of pressure behind putting a vaccine out there, and a lot of the people that are concerned with developing these vaccines are asking these types of questions. They're trying their utmost best to come up with something. They're testing it, but before you can really confidently say that you've got something on your hands that's really interesting, is when you've tested it amongst huge amounts of people, and you've taken out or you've ensured that what you found, indeed will produce positive results for many people. So not just very specific groups of people that you might start out with when you're just testing out things. Before it becomes something really substantial, we need to test it, do it again, and have people look at it and probably have a go at it themselves. And if multiple people confirm certain things, that's and we consistently find that it produces certain results, we've got something really interesting and valuable on our hands, and that's when it really becomes interesting. So those are simple questions and methods of making sure, as a marketer or as a professional just in general, you're doing the right thing, and you'll be really effective and successful as a result, I'm sure.
And certainly in Eat Your Greens, you introduced my students to a number of marketers to follow that are on the right path.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for doing this. My students will be watching it. I'm going to upload it to our module. So from tomorrow, let them know that this will be their Thanksgiving present. I'm going to have this uploaded early. But in summarizing, I mean, that was a brilliant way of laying out the difference between high and low engagement. I really like that because I'm a low engagement guy myself. These high engagement people are just lost. As well as to the students, I've read Wiemer say this often. What does the evidence tell us? I've heard Professor Sharp mention. That is so important to take with you. And as it just was explained, dig deeper. Just because someone says it, you have to look further, because you don't want to be known as a marketer that doesn't have their stuff together. And so marketing based on facts is the best marketing. And remember, we are here to help sell more stuff. We didn't get into this much, but you made the comment of marketing strategy is like the pensioner, the long-term thing. Problem is too many companies are worried about the short-term thing. That's for another discussion. Let me just tell you, next semester, Eat Your Greens will be our textbook again, and we'll wait for the next one. Hopefully that'll be fall 2021. So Wiemer, thank you for doing this. It was awesome. I appreciate it, and my students appreciate it, and have a great week. Is there anything else you want to say to sign off?
No, I just enjoyed this very much. I hope you guys got something out of it, and hopefully you're off on having successful careers and a happy life. So, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm here, and if I've got time, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And Tom, thank you for having me, and you have a great Thanksgiving weekend.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks.